Welcome to this episode of Quiet Power: How Introverted Executives Lead with Calm, Clarity, and Conviction. Yeah, a lot of people feel that leaders who are introverted aren't probably the best leaders. However, I found through my journey as really resonating as an introvert that I did have a lot of challenges early on in my career. And for quite some times, I just said, wow, I'm introverted, I'm quiet, I don't have a great voice, I'm not a great speaker, all these types of things. And really, what I was doing is just feeding, in my opinion, and from my experience, feeding a limited belief that I couldn't overcome some of these challenges of me being an introvert and not being as outspoken or extroverted. And I was just at the third annual conference for the fractionalconference.com, which is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I just returned yesterday. Fantastic people, fantastic content, fantastic relationships, and great networking. They have done a phenomenal job over there at the Fractional Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is my third time speaking there. And I've had a ball being able to share with people. And this year, I talked about the assertive introvert, how fractional professionals, executives, and business owners can develop confidence without having to really reinvent themselves or take on characteristics that they're not comfortable with. Now, here's the one caveat with that we all have to learn and grow. And one of the biggest things that I stressed is that as an introverted executive or business person, you have so much power, whether you're extroverted or you're introverted in this case. And in many cases, a lot of people don't think of introverts as great leaders, even having the capability, but we're all adaptable. You are adaptable. Just like we have roles that we play in our lives. Maybe you're a business owner, you're an executive, you're a team member, you're a parent, you're a car driver, you coach soccer, you might be a pilot like me, you might have skydived before like I've done, or join a Christian surfers group chapter in Michigan. Yes, I joined a Christian surfers organization a few months ago that's a Michigan chapter. And just as a side note, some of the best waves I hear are on the west coast of Michigan and Lake Michigan. And it's in the wintertime, October, November, December, if there's still water showing. Those are some of the best times based upon the weather and wind patterns and everything else. And of course, I was like, oh no, I definitely resonate with being a Christian. However, I am not really a big swimmer, and nor do I like to be in the water that much. However, I took my first lesson just a couple of weeks ago here in October, which is pretty awesome. So I'm an official surfer. Okay, maybe not, not really, but I'm going to get there. And I'm going to learn some skills. I'm going to try some things. And it was actually pretty fun. A lot of energy and excitement the first time I went, since there were a lot of first time surfers going out there. So pretty cool, very dynamic group. But just the whole point is we all have skill sets. We all have positive things about us, behaviors that we have, routines, the skills we have. And we also have things that we can work on, or areas that maybe we're not so comfortable with. But it doesn't mean that we can't be adaptable and shift into those different roles as we need to. Like I was saying earlier, as a parent, as a business owner, as a as a person who's a carrier of kids, taking them to the different soccer and sports events and everything else that's going on. We all have different roles that we shift into on a regular basis. And that's, I think, a great basis to even start from, because many people don't think that, and it's just not even in their awareness, that we jump back and forth in these different roles, these different responsibilities, these different frameworks, different perspectives. And we do that every single day on a regular basis. But once we are aware of what's happening, then we can jump onto that whole concept that, yeah, we can, maybe we don't want to be great speakers as introverts. Maybe we don't want to be presenting all the time or be out in front or be around too many people talking all the time. And you may have to get your rest, really pay attention to your energy levels and what's happening and what really feeds you in terms of rest and being able to operate well. So you may need to really be focused on that and have this awareness that you develop. However, it doesn't mean that you can't learn to be really good. And as I was telling some of the people at the fractional conference, I had a couple of compliments after my talk that a couple of them pretty much said, Cory, I cannot believe that you are introverted or an introvert. And I said, 3 years ago, just shortly after the pandemic, roughly 2022, 2023, I did not even think of myself as a speaker. And all of a sudden, within 3 years, after having some opportunities, making a choice that, yep, this is something I want to do. I want to do what 97% of the people don't want to do that are on this planet. I want to get out there. I want to share who I am, create awareness, develop connections with other people to show the value that I create in their lives when we collaborate, when we partner, when I'm executive coaching them. And that's the same thing for you. You have so much value to offer if you consider yourself an introvert. Of course, all people have great things to offer, but I'm just talking to the introverts or people who feel they have those strong characteristics of an introvert. That most of it for me, I'm talking about for me, were limiting beliefs and the stories I told myself about myself about that and how much I fed that story. And come to find out, I had developed a ton of experience. And I think it was about a decade behind me. I became in leadership position in the late 90s, roughly 95 to 1998. And I'd been leading for multiple years, almost a decade, before I really realized, oh my gosh, I do have leadership skills. Oh my goodness. I do have influence and impact. And I'm in charge of a team of people that are reporting to me. And I never leaned onto that. I just kept that introverted, weak story about myself that, oh, I'm not adaptable. I can't do anything else. I haven't been formally taught, all this stuff. Whereas when I truly reflected on that, I had so many pieces of evidence that, yes, I could be great. Yes, I did have successes, and I was able to work with big executives of multi-billion dollar companies and international companies. And I've been doing that for a long period of time, but I just never gave myself the credit for that. Here's some research. Some research that's been done shows that more than half of people lean toward introversion. And this says 56.8 of people lean toward introversion. And only 39% of top executives identify as introverts. Another study showed that introverted leaders drove roughly 28% higher productivity in a proactive, engaged team compared to their extroverted counterparts. Now that's interesting. This study showing that introverts drove 28% more higher productivity in proactive, engaged teams than compared to extroverts. And we're going to dig into that a little bit because that was very intriguing to me when I found that out. So in short, quiet leadership is underrated yet powerfully effective. And that's this one for every executive who has been told that they're not powerful, that they're too quiet, they're not quick enough on the draw when it comes to helping out or making decisions and all those types of things. And people just realizing that, hey, they're feeling or they've been told that they're too quiet to lead. Well, in this world, in our culture, we typically celebrate the noise or the extroverted people because they're quicker to the jump on once again speaking up, having ideas and sharing them. Whereas introverted leaders tend to have this calm under pressure, and it's probably very underutilized in so many different organizations and leadership teams. Because if you're introverted, you're probably not proactive enough as you could be in asking great questions of the team, eliciting great answers, getting the best out of people. I know I had that challenge of being assertive and kind of wanting to play a back seat in many different ways. Even though I did have ideas, I just didn't feel comfortable sharing them. And if you have introverts on your team, that's another huge thing that you need to consider, that if you see in a meeting that the typical same people are always giving ideas and answers, and you're not going around the room to elicit ideas from people, you're probably missing out on some of the best, deepest information that could come from some of these introverts who might typically take a backseat to raising their hand, to suggesting some decisions or information that they have that they've pieced together because they have thought about these things proactively and in a deep way. And that's why this episode is about how executives, you can thrive and stop trying to perform like an extrovert and just start leading from who you really are, while adding on new skill sets, new techniques, new behaviors, new habits, new mindsets, for goodness sakes. Having a new mindset or mindsets that use your quiet power, that take advantage of your knowledge, because introverted people, according to statistics, over extroverted people, introverted tend to, once again, process these ideas together. And they would rather have this quiet time so they could come back later and make decisions in many cases, rather than just shout out an idea that they quite haven't resolved yet or come to a complete thought on. So you have to realize, as an introvert, or your introversion is just a part of you. That's how I look at it. It's a part of you. Once again, we're adaptable. We shift back and forth in all these different roles and responsibilities that we have. But your quietness is not a weakness. It's your runway for reflection, clarity, and decisive leadership. The reality of the introverted executive is that when there's constant meetings or constant high intensity, everybody's talking, things are going back and forth, there's an emotional overload for most of these introverts. And it leads to them being drained on their energy, when in reality, that environment most likely rewards the loudest voice. So they're operating maybe not as optimally as they can, but if they have that reflection time, they have that recovery time, rest time, and it's strategically placed and allowed to happen, then it may seem like the introvert has a hesitation on things, but that's not a hesitation. That's processing. That's calculating. So you have to realize that, introverted leaders, it may drain their energy. Some people it does, some people it doesn't. The interesting thing I found about myself, and I believe God working through me, is that, was I really an introvert? Because now I don't feel like one. There's a lot of things I do now that are more extroverted. And as I mentioned that comment earlier about people saying, Cory, I cannot believe that you're an introvert, or that you have had any qualities of that area. However, I've worked on myself a lot. Really, it's been a 30-year process, but especially in those last few years where I really latched onto it, say, man, I want to be a speaker. I want to get out in front of people and present. And there have been times I've presented in front of crowds and I've gotten the worst review, and just things not landing. I didn't deliver what they thought I should deliver. I didn't have enough frameworks. I didn't have many graphics, all different types of things. But thankfully, over time, I've learned to ask what's working, or what has worked with my talks, my presentations, and what didn't work. What were some of the challenges? What were some of the biggest disconnects that my crowd experienced? And I work hard to get to that point of ask, because before I was just like, oh, I don't want to know what they say. Let me just get this talk over with, this presentation done, and run. That's what I was thinking. But now I'm at the point where it's no, I want to be a professional. I want to truly give value to the people I engage with. I want to improve my process. I want to improve the clarity that I have and the clarity that comes across from my audiences or my executive coaching clients. So I am serious about investing in a greater vision for myself and for the people that I'm partnering with, one way or another. And I feel that's awesome. That's the goal I have for myself. And that's the higher purpose I see myself. I feel God calling me to become a better person, to use some of that personal development instead of making excuses about, oh, I'm introverted. I don't like talking much. I don't like presenting. I don't like doing all these things. Well, yeah, there's always going to be things that we enjoy doing more than others. However, what if you ever got to a point that these situations of speaking up of presenting are not hitting your emotional drain, just like, oh, you dread doing that. And every time it comes up, you're like, oh, not again, not again. What happens if you were to get to a point like I'm still learning, but I've gotten to a point where it doesn't give me the anxiety that I used to have to get up and speak or to prepare for a talk, because I've hit it with repetition, repetition, growth, learning, repetition, repetition, follow up, growth, learning, follow up, repetition, repetition, keeping my feet to the fire, outreaching for talks, outreaching to give value to people over and over and over, because that's my identity. That's who I am. I took that identity. That's what I want to be a year from now, 10 years from now. And I backtracked it to the activities that I need to do to become that identity. And then surrounded myself with an environment of people and things around me that give me affirmation, that keep me built up to believing that vision that I see of myself, my best self. And what if you could get there? These are the types of things I talk to my coaching clients on. And I know one of them said, it's like, ooh, when I mentioned doing improv, and I did improv about a year ago, 2 sessions of it. And I'm like, that was probably one of the most fun things to do as you learn and grow. And then you start getting some of these small wins, like, oh my gosh. And at first it takes a while. At least it took me to get used to the people around me who I was working with in my, if you want to call them a troupe or group of people in that class, but just developing that trust. And that's the same thing you're trying to do with yourself, your colleagues, your leadership teams, and even your clients. That's important to develop that trust and to continually do this, to continually embody those characteristics that are attractive in terms of business. And I always like to talk about what happens outside of business too, in terms of your family, your relationships, the energy you have towards your home life, or taking vacations, or having experiences, and the meaning that we have, and why most of us are working in the first place. We have something outside of work that gives us passion. Could be traveling, could be buying that new vehicle, could be going on a safari, could be traveling the world, whatever it may be. But really get in touch with the identity of the person, of who you need to become in order to have those experiences in your life, both professionally and personally. It's interesting with introverts, just the whole idea that many of them, another statistic is that many introverts, up to 25%, are not being promoted, and that extroverts are being promoted over them. And that's a terrible statistic, only because in most cases, introverts are not speaking up. They're not the first to be able to confidently express themselves and assertively. And this is why I talked about this at the fractional conference and created that session, because I know even though the statistic is 56.8% of people think of themselves as introverts, that's just over half. However, most of the executives and leaders that I have talked to about this, I said, you're such a great speaker. You must be an extrovert. No, I'm actually kind of introverted. And I heard that message over and over and over. And to come to find out, a lot of people have just been put in situations to develop the skills to become good at what they do and to get the job done. It's not about what they like in most cases. It's about getting the job done, or they just happen to be in these experiences where they've taken on a challenge, or they couldn't say no, or whatever the situation was. And that's how I've been. And then I started proactively inserting a lot of those experiences in my life. How can I be around a bunch of go-getters and go-givers who are making things happen, who, if I can pick up some of the crumbs, be around them, get exposed to what they're doing, learn from them. And that's what happened by doing that and saying yes to opportunities. And people ask me to be a part of leadership. It's, wow, Cory, you seem like you've got things on the ball. You've got a good handle on everything. I wasn't always early, but I'm still working on that, trying to get places early. But my problem usually with that, just getting places early, is usually I like to stay in the game longer. I like to go the extra mile and do things thoroughly and not quit until I'm finished. And of course, we can't always do that with projects and work things and everything else. So that makes me late for the next thing. So it's a great intention. However, it doesn't respect the time of the next person that you're showing up late for. So I've had to learn that and really focus on keeping that integrity when it comes to the previous work project or coaching session, and then the next one that's coming up. Be respectful to both. And it also, when you do that, they respect you and your time more. So your value increases when you show personal integrity through this personal development. So once again, just realize you do, as an introvert, you do not have to compete with extroverts. Just be who you are, and with some of your additional skills, layering on some of these skill sets and becoming better, just so you're confident at it and not always thinking about it. That's an important thing. And just realize that how these statistics toward how introverts are being held back a little bit. And I look at that as introverts holding themselves back. Unfortunately, this is our world of, the people who are the loudest and talk the longest. Many times will get the attention. Doesn't mean that that's always the best or the most accurate information, but it favors charisma and energy and movement. But just realize that some of these challenges for introverts are opportunities to see where you can improve. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things. So when we talk about executive leaders who shut down during heated meetings and they get overstimulated, everybody else is firing off ideas, people are arguing, emotions are high. Just realize you don't necessarily have to be a part of that. You can also raise your hand. You can speak up in the meeting. Hey, this is all great information. I know decisions are being made. I'd like a little more time to be able to think about this. Speak up a little more. Help people to realize what's going on in your head. Not that you're running from the problem or running from the situation, but be proactive and communicate. I know it feels like maybe you might feel incapable. You're not able to make fast decisions. Well, to be honest with you, why would you want to make everybody make fast decisions if it's not something that's within their heart, or if they're out of integrity, or they truly don't understand? If you're just forcing outcomes just because you want the time to be done, there has to be, I feel, a more reasonable way to get the most juice you can out of your team, the best juice, the best information, the best decision making out of your team. Some of those will have faster decision making, other ones will need to think on it. But set a deadline. Does the answer have to be today? In most cases, it shouldn't be, and in most situations, but there are times when you need to make fast decisions on things. But in most cases, set a deadline on it, reconvene, come back, and this is just the best choices that we can make at this point in time. We can't procrastinate and just keep sitting on those things. So just realize that, and just realize just the whole idea that, our culture, the environment is pretty much one way when it comes to, once again, the people who are kind of loud and proud and in your face. But it doesn't mean that's the full, complete answer. So you have to realize that some of these introverted people, they have vision. They have a little more processing time, the calculation of ideas. And so once again, you're missing out if you shortcut yourself on this, or if you don't glean some of that information from somebody who is on your team who tends to have the introverted characteristics or introversion. So extroverted leaders, they inspire motion. Introverted leaders inspire meaning and deeper thinking. So also realize too, as from a spiritual side of things, Jesus withdrew to pray and got away from people, so he was in solitude and not in the spotlight all the time. So realize there's a nice balance that can happen there. And I know just one example, when I was young for myself, I was very quiet. High school football, Huron High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Back in the late 80s, I was extremely quiet. So when everybody was in the huddle, like, okay, let's go, let's do it, I was just, this is what I sounded like. I just had my hand up. I'm like, yep, got my hand up, but not saying anything. Yep, that's the silence. That's exactly what I sounded like when I was yelling and screaming. I didn't say anything. I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. And then there was a point when I was training, I think it was my freshman year, my sophomore year. My coach, I played quarterback and running back. And one day I complained to my coach. I'm like, Coach, I just want to be a running back. Why do you put me at quarterback? Everybody else only has one position to learn, to play, only one set of plays to learn for the most part. But as a running back, I've got to learn those plays. And then you throw me in the quarterback second because we needed a second and third quarterback. And I'm like, oh. So then as a quarterback, he had to learn everyone's plays and knew where everyone had to be on the offense. So it's like, oh my gosh. But I complained to him. He took me aside quietly and he whispered to me, he's like, Cory, I hate to say this, but he's like, you're one of the few people on this team who is picking up a lot of these plays. When we ask you to do something, you do it. You're one of the fastest learners on the team. And I never thought of myself as a fast learner because it took me work just to get a B grade in something. and I just didn't have the interest. I probably had ADD, and I had difficulty reading, all kinds of things growing up. And so I thought that's just who I was, and I couldn't improve that at the time. Of course, I was young. I didn't know. But I pulled a lot of those limiting beliefs and limited knowledge into my adulthood, and I held on to those stories, and I fed those stories, which didn't help me at all. So we have a choice. You have a choice. And so after my football coach told me that, and my chest started puffing up a little bit, and Cory, you're one of the fastest learners on this team, and I felt like, ooh, how many more positions do you have for me to take on? I didn't say that, but I went back into practice, and I never complained after it. I'm like, wow, my coach was an excellent leader in explaining to me how valuable I was, and also reaching into me and say, Cory, you not only are you valuable, but you're intelligent, you're smart, you are in the top, not of this class, of your class, but you're in the top when it comes to this football team and people using their heads. I was one of the smallest people too, but so you got to realize that even though you might be introverted, you might be quiet, you may not have the skill sets that you think are going to work very well, but just realize you can always learn, you can always grow, and just decide who you want to become. Don't let your workplace, your organization, your market, your friends, your spouse, I don't care who they are, don't let them decide what kind of life you should lead. They might be able to see some of your fallacies, some of your weaknesses, and they also can see some of your strengths, your superpowers, but you need to be the one to decide what your life should look like, what experiences you want to have, who's the best you that can show up. And like I was speaking to one of the other people that didn't think I was an introvert anymore, I told them that, I said, I asked them, I said, well, how do you see yourself? They said, well, I can never do improv. I can never do this. I can never do that. And I said, well, what are you capable of in 2026? What are you capable of in the next quarter, in the next 6 months of becoming, of strengthening? What kind of skill sets, what beliefs are you improving upon? Who are you going to become as your best self in 2026? And they thought, and they said, I really don't know. And I said, well, who does God see you as becoming? What's the best version of your person? Now, do you think that was the person from now looking back to the past? Do you think you're your best version of yourself right now? Or do you feel that God has a better version for you, that he's not done with you yet? And they kind of thought like, oh, wow, that's powerful. Because I said, you didn't realize everything you've done up to this point, that's we're just talking about the positive things and the accomplishments you've had. You did not realize that you were going to be where you are today and develop all the skills you have 10 years ago. You didn't know that. But because you didn't just stay stagnant and still and rest on your laurels or just rest on what's comfortable for you. Some things we all do to some degree, but for the most part, you're active, you're in the workforce, you're a professional, and you're an executive, that God is not finished with you. So if we are willing and have the mindset that, hey, we're always on this growth journey, that's just who we are. I'm a person who grows. I'm a person who works on myself. I trust in God's direction. I trust in God's wisdom. I ask for guidance. I'm going to be the best person I can be right now, so it helps me to improve and learn and grow moving into the future. Because if I don't have the skill sets, the mindset, the discipline, the persistence, the perseverance, if I don't develop those things today on a daily basis, and it doesn't have to be a lot and huge jumps and leaps every day, but when you take little leaps every day, that's going to amount and compound in some huge progress and pretty impressive things that you won't recognize yourself a year from now. So you just have to realize that we are not stagnant as a human race. And God did not create us just to sit down after we reach a certain level of serving people or finances or whatever it may be. But God's always working in us and on us. And really our capacity and potential is unlimited. So realize, here's some characteristics before I close out here. Just realize, truly use your gift of listening first, gather data, and be willing to take your time to process that. Then when the time is right, speak with intention. Choose words that carry weight, not just the volume, the the quantity, but choose quality and words that carry weight. Create reflection time. Truly designate this time as a part of your daily routine and after you learn something to reflect on what you've learned and integrate it. And of course, guard your energy. If we don't watch our energy, this is for anybody, but especially for introverts, guard your energy. If you need to get away from people, need to have downtime or solo time, get away, take a walk, get away from your desk, maybe go and exercise, whatever it is. It can be anywhere from a couple of minutes break from your workspace or whatever it may be, up to an hour, a couple of hours going out in nature or doing something fun or something enjoyable. And then practice strategic visibility. Show up where your presence creates an impact. Be intentional about that. Practice this as a skill so it becomes more ingrained in who you are as the leader you are and still growing and becoming. And realize this whole mindset shift that your quietness and your stillness is a strength. It's not a weakness. Society doesn't always honor that, but we're not talking about society. We're talking about what's coming from you and within you, inside of you. And also, I recommend praying before your performance. Invite God to lead you through these times of either meetings or decisions or gathering information. You don't have to have charisma to do all that. You still have a ton of great value. And one piece of scripture, which is Psalm 46:10, says, "Be still and know that I am God." Just realize it's the space where God gives you as a leader, and he also gives you that next instruction and direction. So if you're an introverted leader, stop apologizing for your calm and start refining it. Start reframing it to be a superpower. And you can ask, where am I focusing on performance instead of leading from peace? And potentially you might want to schedule 15 minutes of silence this week. No phone, no noise, and just ask God for direction. Just get clarified, just get simplified. And just realize once again, your strength isn't in noise. It's in knowing. It's in knowing. So if this episode spoke to you, share with the leader who feels unseen in the noise or feels like they don't have the beliefs about themselves or the capability or skill set. Share this with them. They have hope. They have so much hope, and they don't have to be that loud leader to make a huge impact. We're just looking at getting the impact, right? So we're using the gifts we currently have, our strengths, and we're using the gifts that we are learning to hone in on also for when we are in those roles, in those times when we need to be the leader in that situation using our strengths. So this is Cory Dunham, and this is Unapologetic Leadership. Lead with calm, lead with conviction, and let God's voice be louder than the crowd.